Anyone have any idea what socket.io is? What this whole concept is?
As in, like, establish push and pull mechanisms between client and servers.
Yeah, that's a pretty good description. So thus far, when we've communicated with our server, who always initiates that communication?
Client.
It's always coming from the client side. So if we type something in our address bar, client is then making a GET request, right? Or if we make an API request and we go reach out to our server to get some data or whatever, again, it's being initiated on the client side. So what's neat about Socket is that it allows us to actually have things that are initiated from the server side. So you guys can maybe think of some interesting applications for this. What if we had like an auction platform, something like eBay, right? And a bunch of different people were bidding for an item, and we needed to essentially alert all of our clients that the bidding price had gone up to a certain level. Well, that's something that we could potentially use sockets for, because sockets allow the server to then broadcast a message out to everyone else and say, hey, this event has happened. Okay? So in order to actually get this thing set up, I was planning to do this in a couple different steps. So this morning we'll basically just establish all the framework for this two-way communication, and then in the afternoon we can meet up again and sort of make some messages happen. Something a little bit more interesting. This is just going to be sort of the setup part. Yeah, nice. So the first thing that we need to do is set up our project, just like we've been doing with anything else. So in my terminal here, I'm going to go to my lectures, stacks, mern, lectures. Okay, and then we'll just make a directory. So we'll call this socket demo, and then I'll open that up in VS Code. Now that we've got this guy open up here, we're going to start a new Express project, right? So let me just create some folders here. I'll create a folder for my server side. And then inside that server folder, what file do we usually need to have? We're going to need to have our server.js, right? Okay, and then in my terminal, what I'm going to do is I'm going to install. Well, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of initialize a project. You guys remember how we do that? So npm init, and then what does that -y do again? Yeah, basically it allows us to not have to answer a bunch of questions, which is nice because we don't like answering questions. All right, and then we need to install our dependencies, right? So the one that we've been using most of all for our server-side stuff has been Express, right? So I'll install that. Oops, make this bigger. Express. And then the other thing that we're going to install is this new dependency. This is going to allow us to do the two-way communication. So we want to install socket.io. Socket.io. No, I'm actually not going to install Mongoose here because we're not really involving our database in this. This is strictly just going to be kind of like a small little chat application. That's it. Nothing else going. Kind of depends. Let's say I wanted to actually save the messages in some kind of a database, and it was a MongoDB. Yeah, I would probably want to use Mongoose for that, right? Yeah. So in this case, we're not going to do anything like that. It's going to be a very simple type setup. So we've installed socket.io. I've got this server.js file here. I need to bring in Express, right? Pretty typical. Const express equals require Express. Okay. And then the other thing that we need to do, so always at the end of our server.js, how do we get our application running? It's always app.listen, right? So, but in this case, we're going to do something slightly different, which is we're going to save a reference to this function that we're calling. So we're going to say const server equals app.listen, and then we'll say whatever port we want to listen on. So again, if I want to use 4500, I can do that. Okay. And the reason why we're saving a reference to this is because we're going to need to use that to actually get our socket hooked up. Okay. Now what I'm going to do that I have a reference to the server is I'm going to create another variable called IO. And I'm going to require socket.io. Okay? And what that's going to give me is going to give me a function that I can actually call against my server that I just created right there. So let's pass in the server like that. So now I've got this thing called IO, and IO is something that I can add event listeners to. You guys kind of remember that concept of event listeners? Sort of. Like when we click on a button in the DOM, for instance, we might have an event listener that would then fire off, right? Yeah, like an on-click type of situation. So when we do on-click in React, React is then adding that event listener on there for us. It's kind of doing a lot of the stuff behind the scenes. So here we're going to add an event listener to this IO object. And the event that we're going to listen for is called a connection event. Okay? You can see here, event, connection. So that's the very first, it's basically the very first event that we're expecting from our client side. So when somebody on the client side connects and is wanting to chat or something, then this connection event will fire.
Just a quick question then. For line 5, how does that syntax work with this server? It's weird. The require socket.io, then another parenthesis of server. So what, like require returns another function, and then you're passing server to it?
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I could split that into 2 lines if that makes a little more sense for you guys. But basically, when I require socket.io, it's returning me back a function. Then I'm immediately calling that function against the server there that we saved a reference to. Okay, so if we're adding this event listener and we're listening for a connection event, what do you guys think the second argument to this on function should be? Very good. Yeah, it's going to be a callback function. So, well done. Totes. All right. So what that's going to give us is it's going to give us a reference to a socket. Okay. That's going to be the one argument that this thing takes. I'll open up the body of our callback function and let's just let's log some stuff out. So we'll say console.log new person joined. Okay. And then maybe I'll do something out here. So I'll create like a count variable that we update every time that we have a new person join our chat. So I'll just say let num equals 0. Okay. And then every time I get someone connecting to my chat, I could say num plus plus, or actually, yeah, let's num plus plus, and then let's console.log num plus people are online right now. Okay? Does this part kind of make sense to you guys here? All I'm saying is a new person is joined, and then I want to increment this counter, right? So that we can always kind of, we should theoretically know how many people we have on our chat application. And then down here, I'm just saying this is how many people we have connected right now. Okay. Any questions about this before we
What is the
move on?
function on the line
So this is adding an event listener.
So you use the on IO.
Yeah, so we do io.on. The on is like, remember some of the earlier stuff I was showing you guys in the DOM where we'd say something like some element dot add event listener. It's kind of the same thing. This is like we're adding an event listener for the connection event, and then this is the callback function that's going to run it. Right?
Connected, that will fire that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'll fire off whatever our callback function was. Okay, cool. So I realized that I forgot to use my express up here. What did I forget to do? Well, I didn't even make an app. There's no app right now, so I should probably do that, right? Express like that. Okay, fair enough. And then we didn't do anything with this socket down here, so I'll just console log that out for now. We can look at it. Socket. Okay. Socket to me. So this is the server side. Now we got to handle the client side, right? All right. So let's go down to our terminal here. And I'm going to create a React app in the same way that we always do. So we'll say npx create React app client. Yeah, I've heard that this has been taking really long for Windows users.
Oh,
is that right?
Yeah. A lot longer than yours.
Right. Yeah, I feel for you guys. Yeah, there you go. Good chance to like check your text and all that sort of thing, right? All right, so once we get that set up, I'm going to go into my client folder here. Let's go into the source folder, and we'll go into our app.js. So this is where our main stuff is happening, right? And I'm also going to need I'm going to install an additional dependency for the client side, okay? It's basically going to be the client side version of our socket.io. Okay, so let's go inside our, let me clear this out. Let's go inside our client folder, and then we're going to say npm install, or I, and we'll say socket.io -client. That's right? Yes. Okay, so once that guy gets installed, I'm going to want to import it up here in the top of our app.js. All right, so let's assume that that's going to install. So up here, I know I'm not really going to need this this logo, my CSS. I can kind of start from scratch in here. Okay, cool. Another thing that I am probably going to need from React, because we're going to have some state involved, is going to be what? Use state, right? And also, I'm going to have one of these actions that I want to run when the thing first loads. So what else might we want? The use effect. Use state. Okay. And then inside my app function here, I need to first import my socket.io client. So let me just dump this. So we'll say import io from socket.io-client. Okay. And then when this component first loads, let's do this. Let's say const socket equals use state. right? And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to invoke that IO function right there. IO is giving me a function, kind of just like it did on the back end. This time I need to invoke it against whatever the IP address, or I'm sorry, whatever the port number is for my server. So my server was going to be running on port 4500, right? So I'll pass in this string that has colon 4500 inside of it. Okay.
So why
So
not have a set socket function, maybe a modifier function?
yeah, that's a good question. Are we ever going to change that?
No, then why bother using the state?
Well, where else would I do it? Out here inside the component? Suppose that's possible.
Well, no, because I was going to say, like, why not just go socket equals IO?
Oh, like right here in line 5 to say.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Why even use state at this point? Because I thought, like, the purpose of use
Well, so
state.
here's what's going to happen. That's a really good question. So let's say I do this, like what you're saying. Const socket equals IO. Dot. Okay. So how many times is this guy going to run? Potentially an unlimited number of times, because
Right.
every time that this code gets run again, we'll create a new socket. Is that what we want to do? We really only want to connect one a single time, right?
Yep.
So when this component first loads, that's why we're doing the use state version. Still problematic for you?
Yeah, because I feel like that touches on the concept I'm not too familiar with. Because the thing is, you're saying when this thing first runs, and it's going to be like, this is on the client side, right? So that means when I execute it, because it's the function, I can have other things calling this. So that means like the use state function. I don't know.
So let's kind of review a little bit about what was going on when we're updating the state of a component, because we kind of saw this yesterday a little bit.
Right.
Whenever we make some change to the state of a component, it then causes this code to be rerun. Which means that if I do it this way, how many times am I going to create socket connections? Potentially an unlimited number of times.
But there's not the declaration.
So as soon as like something changes in the state of this component, it's then going to rerun and we're going to create another socket.
But there's a declaration of constant won't make a change like to an error saying that this thing has been declared already or something like that nature?
No, because every single time this function runs, it creates its own execution context. So it doesn't matter that inside the last execution context I had a const socket. I can create a new one now. It's a whole new execution context because the code's running again.
So then the use state creates a reference object that can persist across multiple executions.
Yes, exactly. And that's the point. We want to have just this one socket and not mess with it after that.
It's very, very interesting. It's yeah.
Yeah. No, definitely, for sure. Question?
So, is there any difference than when you put a variable called socket outside the use effect, and you assign that variable within the use effect?
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting question too. So your question is, could I just say let's socket like that, and then inside use effect do this?
Yeah.
Potentially that could work. Yeah. I mean, it's not really the most React kind of way of doing things if we're declaring something out here, right? Also, the other thing is that what if I had socket components in multiple places in my app?
Also, you want to pass down using that.
So I literally would only have one, but then one might overwrite another one because I've got one outside this, which means it's kind of like the global socket, right?
Okay.
And then if I had, multiple components that were trying to use this thing,
So you kind of lost the reference to that.
yeah, it could get overwritten
Okay.
later on by some other thing. Yeah. Okay. So for now, what we want to do, basically all we're trying to do is we're just trying to connect to our back end. That's pretty much it. And then we want to make sure that on the back end, we're getting some kind of, heads up. A new person has joined, that sort of thing. So let's go to our back end and let's actually get it running. CD server. Okay. Or I'll just go out of here. Let's do nodemon server/server.js. Okay, so we're running there. Now I need to run my client as well, right? So go into my client, npm start. Here we go. Let's open up our terminal here. Still loading. What? Okay. Starting the dev server. Usually it's faster than that. There you go. Dev server. Okay. Alright, so let me just refresh here. Let's see if anything's happening. And then if I go into my server-side terminal here, wow. Why does it say two people are
Refreshed.
Exactly. Yeah, so what happened was, as Isaiah mentioned here, I actually reloaded the page, which means that we had another connection event. But what I could have done is I also could have listened for a disconnection event, in which case I would decrement that counter, right? So let's see if we can do that. Inside our server.js, I'll add another event listener here. So we'll say socket.on. I think it's disconnect, not disconnection. Okay. What do I need to pass as a second argument here? Callback function, right? So here, all I'm going to do is I'm going to create this function that will decrement our counter. And then I'll say console.log someone left. And then I'll make kind of a double sad face or whatever.
Minus.
Yeah, whoa. Sorry. Things are going to get really haywire there. Alright, cool. So someone left. So let's try this. Yeah. So for the second one, it's a little tricky, but I'm specifically listening for this socket to disconnect. Okay? You see how that's inside? We're already inside of a callback function. So I can't add an event listener to this specific socket until we actually have a reference to it. Now I do. Now I've got this reference to that socket right there. So let's see if we can get that to work. If I open up my terminal here and I were to just shut this guy, there we go, right? Saying someone left. Okay, and then if I open it back up, I know, yeah, my sad face. Localhost 3000. Okay, so now we've got this new message, right? New person joined, one people. I like how that sounds. One people are online right now. Okay, and then one thing too, I forgot to mention, we did console log the socket itself. So if you guys want to take a look at that, let me just expand this a little bit. I guess I can't. Maximize. Okay, cool. So here you guys can see there's a whole lot going on with this socket. The socket has an ID, which could be used to potentially identify somebody if we wanted to. What else do we have? No, that's a good question too. So what's going to happen is that every time I refresh the page, two things are happening, right? That socket is being disconnected, and then you're going to reconnect with a different socket ID. So generally when we're doing our socket type applications, there's some expectation here that a person's not going to be constantly refreshing the page, right? It's like we're just going to be submitting some stuff, things are changing in real time, that kind of thing. So it's a very good fit for a single page application where we're not really doing hard page refreshes. Okay? All right, so yeah, you can see there's a whole bunch of stuff inside this socket connection here. The refer is there. You can see the user agent, so that's basically just saying what kind of browser I'm using and so forth. There's a cookie here, CSRF token. Gosh, where do you guys think that's from? Does anyone remember Python? Yeah, so that's actually from Python, because I was doing a lot of stuff on localhost as well. Same thing.
Conceptually, what exactly is a socket?
So a socket is like, think of it as a wall socket, right? It allows us to get electricity out of the wall, and enable some kind of communication that's going in both directions, right? So before we kind of break and come back for the afternoon is where we'll do more interesting stuff with the sockets, but I want to make sure that this setup mostly kind of makes sense for you guys. Let's kind of go through the code a little bit. Michael, why don't you do like lines 1 through 7 on this, on server.js.
For line 1 is requiring a variable const variable express.
Mm-hmm.
And grabbing some express.
So we're requiring the express library, right? Okay, very good. Cool, next.
And then you're putting that line 3, putting the express into the const variable. And calling express.
There you go, right? So we're creating a constant variable called app, and then we're assigning that to the result of invoking that express function. Good, next.
And line 5 is the listener.
So again, left side.
Constant, declaring a constant variable server.
Yes, good.
And we're assigning
Assigning it.
app.listen to server.
So we're assigning the server to the result of calling the app.listen function, right? And then app.listen takes in some port. Okay, good. Next. That's it.
The required socket
Well, what about the left side?
Oh, constant declaring a const variable IO,
Mm-hmm.
and you're assigning required socket IO, which returns a function, and the function is passing the server to that.
Yeah.
And then
So IO is being assigned to the result of calling this socket.io function against our server variable, right? Okay, good. Cool. Next, Stefan.
Line 9, so we're basically making a num equals to 0, so basically that's going to be our counter.
That's just how many people we have connected to our app, right? And then on line 11,
11 is we're calling the IO.onSelect connection. and then we're called
So the function that we're calling is the on function,
on.
which
Yeah.
is going to add an event listener to this IO object, right?
Calling
Okay.
it added, yes, and then
The event that we're listening for is called what?
connection.
Good.
And then we
Connection.
have the callback function
Good.
called socket. I mean, not call socket.
So the callback function is going to take in a socket.
Takes in a socket.
Okay.
And inside it will return a console log, which is basically console log what's in the socket.
Yeah, so we're actually not returning anything, right? We're just console logging out
Yeah,
the
we're just-
socket itself.
And
What
then
else are we doing?
we're just console logging new person join,
Right.
and then if someone joined, and then we're just gonna do plus plus.
Yeah, so this is incrementing our counter, right? We have one more person join. Yes, question.
What is the cost for global and then for the scope? Or why you would use them for defining
Well, because we're going to change this, right? If I say const num equals 0 and then later on I try to increment it, that's going to cause an error.
what was it? Do we have var here or not?
var? Yeah, we could use var. Yeah. I'm typically just using lets and consts with you guys because we're more in the ES6 syntax realm now. But you can use var if you find yourself more comfortable with that. Yeah. All right. So we incremented our counter. Let's keep going. Dan, what's happening here on line 16?
You're console logging the number of people that are online right now.
Good. All right, and then on line 8, let's go from 18 through 21.
Socket dot on.
So again, if we
Yeah.
say on, what does that mean? You see the parentheses here. What's that telling us? We're invoking the on function,
The on
right?
function.
Okay. And what are we passing it in? So what does that string mean? Let's say disconnect right there. It's essentially the same as what we were saying over here. This is the event that we're
Oh, that's the
interested in.
that's the
Yeah, that's the name of the actual event. Okay, and then the second argument is what? So when we see this arrow like this, what does that generally indicate throughout that? It's an arrow function, right? So this is our callback function. So what we're saying is that when this event happens, when there's a disconnection, let's run this code in here, in the callback function. Okay, and then in the body of that callback function, what are we doing?
We're calling the number of people.
Calling it? You mean here right there? So remember, num's not function, right? I can't invoke that. But what am I doing? Decrementing. Yeah, I'm just taking one away. Okay, cool.
I see it.
Cool. And then next line?
Console log, someone left.
Yeah, bummer, right?
Yeah.
So sad. Yeah, very sad. All right, let's take a quick peek inside our app.js, and then we'll be done.
So I'll say?
You can start, let's just start from line 2.
Cool. So that means that we're importing the whatever the default export is, right?
Okay, good. Next, line 4.
And then we got AJ. Oh, Vince.
There you are.
Line 4, we're just basically making a function called app. Or not even really.
No, that's right. We are, right?
Are we? Oh, yeah,
We're
are.
declaring a function app. You're absolutely right. Cool. All right, and then let's get inside there. Let's say we're inside our app function, line 5.
We're making a variable called socket.
Yep.
And we are using state. We're using state function like get it.
Good. So what when we pass something into use state, what What does that mean? Like in some of the cases, I know I was passing a null to use state. What were we doing that for again? Yeah, it's for the initial value, right? So the initial value of socket in this case will be what? It's going to be the result of calling IO, the IO function, against this port number right here. Okay? So it means that we're going to have access to this socket, but we don't really have any plans to change it. So I didn't even bother destructuring the set socket, right? I'm not going to like update it at some point later on. All right, cool. And you can see that we have nothing going on here, so our screen is completely white. Later on in the afternoon, we're going to create like a little box where we can input some messages and have people, you know, say stuff to each other. Right? This is just the setup.
All right. Cool. Yeah. Any questions? Anybody want